And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, Season 2, Episode number 2. This week we're kicking off the guest episodes with a bang. I have an amazing episode queued up with wildlife photography extraordinaire Karolina Norée. If you haven't heard of Karolina before and you're not familiar with her work, she is an amazing Swedish wildlife photographer based out of South Africa. She's built an amazing business around her photography, selling prints, ebooks, and most recently courses, and also workshops out in the wild. She's been hosting workshops and safaris with a partner, Craig, all throughout South Africa, but in surrounding countries as well, like Tanzania and Botswana. Her story is incredible, and she has honestly done it all when it comes to wildlife photography, and I'm super excited to have had her on the podcast in this episode today. You know, I first met Karolina on Instagram, actually. I think I came across one of her videos, and I was so, blown away by how genuinely helpful they were. I think a lot of people on Instagram, a lot of people on social media aren't out to try and help. They're just trying to sell something, sell you on something, sell them on their own products, on the services that they're offering. But I think Karolina really stood out to what she was doing for me personally, in that she was genuinely trying to help people. She's just one of those people who loves photography and just wants to help share what she knows with everyone else around her. And that was just a massive breath of fresh air in the space that, I loved. And I sort of reached out to her and we started to connect over our genuine love of photography in that way, but also more generally just her love of creativity and what she's been able to do with her own business and expanding and being able to try so many different things over the years to get her to the point where she is today. She's also super real about the struggles and challenges that come along in the creative space, and that's something that I love to talk about as well. So I really appreciate that she has been open and honest on Instagram and online especially, but in this episode as well, and you guys will hear that as we go through today's episode. A few things we touch on today in this episode is mostly around, how she started her photographic journey, how she started her creative journey, where this podcast, is all about. From getting her first camera to all the way becoming, an ambassador with Sony, where she is today in South Africa, which I think is an incredible story. And she went through the whole thing, which was amazing to hear for myself, being someone who is not in that wildlife photography space at all, and hear how she was able to do it. There's so many things that I was able to draw from that, in so many different similarities in the way that we both started our careers in photography. We also dive into how she moved across the world. She moved from her home country of Sweden down to South Africa, and then actually fell in love with wildlife photography once she moved there. We go all into that about how that move was, halfway across the world to go and actually pursue something that she really loves. So I love that she was so open and honest in this conversation. And then even moving even further into her photography business, how she's been able to sustain herself as a photographer and being able to sell prints and courses and workshops and safaris, in-person type of stuff, and how scary that was when it was first starting. I know she talks a lot about that. So much great stuff in this episode, guys. And I hope that you are really looking forward to hearing this conversation as much as I am, because there's so much that we could have spoken about. I could have kept this conversation going for 3 or 4 hours if I wanted to, but I'm excited to have more left in the tank, that potentially we can bring her back on for a round 2 episode. If you guys really enjoy what we've been talking about in today's episode, do let me know, because I'd love to have Karolina back on, because she was an amazing guest on the podcast. Now, before we do jump into today's episode, I do want to warn you that my audio is a little bit bad. My microphone wasn't plugged in. I didn't realize. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, you will see that I have a microphone that I'm recording through at the moment, but I didn't realize that it wasn't connected. So my audio is coming through my computer. That's why it sounds bad. I thought about re-recording this episode, but out of respect to Karolina and her time and how much genuinely good information she shared in this episode, I didn't want to, re-record it and have that all go to waste. So I wanted to put it out there for you guys, and I hope that you can really push through my audio, because it's not about me, and just hear what Karolina is having to say in this episode, because she does drop a lot of wisdom in this episode, and I enjoyed going back and actually hearing it again. So I hope that you guys get so much out of it. But with that said, I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's give a warm welcome to Karolina Norée. Hey Mike. Well, hi Karolina. It is great to have you on the podcast today. I've been trying to organize this for quite a long time, because I really wanted the opportunity to have a chat with you. So I really appreciate you turning up and actually taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be here. Why don't you tell the folks what you've been up to recently? I saw that you were in Tanzania last week. Why don't you go through what you've been working on?
Well, yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me, Mike. That's as you said, we've been trying to organize this for so long, and it's like just both busy schedules and just trying to get that together. It's one of those things when you're in the creative field, I guess, just trying to get schedules together can be a mission. So I'm glad we could make it happen. Yeah, recently it's been very busy recently. I've been on so many crazy adventures, and right now my life feels a bit wild, and sometimes I have to pinch myself and wonder if it's actually real, because I'm just traveling kind of all over Africa and been in like 6 different countries in the past 2 months, which is just wild. So the most recent one I was in Tanzania. I was hosting my yearly workshop there with an incredible group of 10 people from literally all over the world. And it was an amazing adventure. And we had some incredible sightings and just all connecting over the love of photography, which is my favorite part of hosting these workshops. So yeah, it was really, really cool. And then next up is my South African workshop, which is starting on Monday. So that's my next thing that I'm going on, which I'm also super excited for. So yeah, life is busy, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. Where is your South African workshop at? Like, is that a lot easy? Is that easier for you? I'm assuming.
It is. So the South African workshop is in the Greater Kruger. So Kruger is a bit difficult to explain sometimes for people who maybe don't know it. You've got the national park itself, which is state-owned, and you've got the Greater Kruger ecosystem, which is privately owned land that is open to the national park, so the animals can move freely in between, and it's all the same ecosystem, but it's just privately owned land. And then within those privately owned areas, there's reserves. So different reserves will have slightly different rules. And then you've got the landowners that own their private land within those reserves. So the place we're going to is part of the Greater Kruger. It's in a reserve called Kasiri, and it's at a lodge called Nzumba. And it's an area where me and my fiance used to work before we started our own business and went full time with what we do today. So it's an area that's very like near and dear to us, because we worked there for 2 years, and it's a really like kind of a hidden gem because it's not as commercial as other areas. So there's not a lot of like commercial lodges, not a lot of vehicles, which is fantastic, and great for photography because you'd never have cars in the background or anything, and it's like very, very wild. So it's a really, really awesome part of Kruger. So that's where we're going, and it is a little bit easier, I guess, than Tanzania, because I don't have to fly there. Even though Tanzania is obviously in Africa, I think people don't always realize how big Africa is and how complicated it is to fly from one place to another, because it's not like Europe where like there's direct flights everywhere. It's one a lot bigger than Europe, but also just complicated to fly anywhere. So flying from Johannesburg to Arusha, which is the airport you'll fly to when you do Serengeti and everything in Tanzania, it's actually a lot more complicated. So just the travel time there and back adds on a lot of time and just makes it more difficult. So that's why Kruger is a lot easier, but it's also a lot more of an adventure going to Tanzania. So they both have their pros and cons that way.
Does it ever get old to you? Because I kind of see what you do like on Instagram and things like that, and I'm like, that just looks so out of this world for anything that I can have in my head.
It's a really good question, because it's something that I'm actually like thinking about a lot now, because I've been traveling so much in Africa in the past couple of months and seen so many new areas. And like, obviously there's so many incredible places in Africa and in the world that I want to go and explore and visit. And like, there's so much on my list that I want to do. But I have to be honest and say, like, Kruger still just has my heart. Like, I can't get over Kruger. And like, whenever I go anywhere else, I can't help but compare it to Kruger. And I'm obviously quite biased, but I keep on being like, nah, Kruger's the best. Like, I need to go back there. And like, when I'm in other places and like, I'm just like, nah, but you know what, in Kruger, this is better, or that is better. Even though obviously other places have like their pros that Kruger might not have. But 100%, like, I just keep on going back to Kruger. But then also, like, it doesn't get old because of, like, one, the animals are always different in one way. They're always doing different things, and you never know what's around the next corner. You never know if like a leopard is going to pop up around the next bush. That excitement just makes it never ending. But then also Kruger is such a big ecosystem. It's 2.5 million hectares, so it's about the size of Israel. So like it's the size of countries. So it's a huge ecosystem, and that way there's always new places to explore, new areas to explore that just also still has the same like homey feel, I guess, because I've been working and living in the area for so long. I feel like connected to it from like an emotional point of view, but there's still new exciting areas to explore and new exciting things to see, if that makes sense.
So for everyone who's listening today, can you go through a bit of the story of how you ended up there? Because I just think it's like, how did you get there?
It's a wild story. It's crazy. And like, everyone, I often get the question, people wanting to do the same thing. And the unfortunate thing is I can't really tell people like do this or do that, because it's just like circumstances that ended up working out. And I never planned this, and it just ended up happening, and I've just been following kind of intuition in my dream, and then here I am. So the way it started was just a super spontaneous trip to South Africa after I graduated, like our equivalent to high school. Oh, so let me start by saying I'm from Sweden, for anyone who doesn't know. I forgot to mention that. So I grew up in Sweden, and that's also why my accent might be a little bit off. Some people always wonder about my accent. So I grew up in Sweden, and then when I finished our equivalent to high school, I wanted to travel. I wanted to do something different and wanted to see the world. And a lot of my friends actually around that time, a lot of people would go to Australia, for example, and do backpacking in Asia and like do a lot of those type of things. But I didn't really feel like didn't really cool me. Like it didn't really feel like something I was super keen to do. Wasn't really my thing. And then because of super random circumstances, I ended up getting the idea of coming to Africa and do horse riding, because I've always done horse riding growing up, and I didn't want to take a break from that at that point. I wanted to continue doing that while also traveling. And then got this idea because of random circumstances and ended up literally Googling like Africa horses volunteering, and then booked a trip a month later on the first thing that came up. And then that was a 2-month trip in South Africa in a little town called Hoedspruit, which I couldn't pronounce at the time when I arrived. And it's just outside Kruger National Park. It's literally like at the border of the privately owned areas of Kruger National Park. And it's pretty much like a wildlife hub in South Africa. So yeah, I ended up in Hoedspruit. And there was this horse safari place there that I was volunteering at for 2 months. And it was more of just a holiday than like volunteering. The volunteering work was riding the horses, so it wasn't much work. And that just made me absolutely fall in love with the country. And I started doing a bit of wildlife photography at that time, just for fun, obviously, and just really enjoyed it. And when I came back to Sweden, I was like, all I could think about was coming back to South Africa. And I was like, I just need to go back there. Like it just felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. So about 1.5 years later, after saving up money, I was able to come back and do my guide training, which is called Fugasa here in South Africa. And so I got my level 1, which is like the very basic guide training. And while I was doing that training, I met my now fiance. So at that point, I wanted to be in the country, but I didn't really know how because of visas and everything, and it's difficult. So I wanted to be in the country, and I was just trying my best to kind of learn more about wildlife. And at that point, I was also like building a little bit more, learning more about my wildlife photography and doing all that. And then I met him, and then that obviously gave me a bit of a stronger connection to the country. And then as time went on, eventually I was able to apply for my spousal visa, which is it's almost like a marriage visa, even though we're not married. But yeah, that made it possible for me to be in the country and work in the country because of him. So that's kind of how I ended up, where I am today. And then, the rest is history, I guess.
First thing that came to mind was what was it that made you think of South Africa when you thought of like horses? Because I don't think that would be the first place that springs to my mind.
No, exactly. And like for me, it's actually funny because like Africa had never been on my radar. And I'd never really thought about it as a place I wanted to travel to. I know that for a lot of other people that feels weird because they're like, oh, Africa is like the dream destination. And I 100% understand that now. But back then, it wasn't on my radar at all. But it was actually because my parents have a friend who lived in Kenya for a long time, and he's actually now married to a Kenyan woman, and they've got a child. So like, and now they've moved back to Sweden. But he lived in Kenya for a very long time, and we were supposed to go visit him at some point. And my parents like said that to me and my brothers, and they were like, oh, should we go to Kenya for holiday and visit him? And we were all like, nah, we don't want to go to Kenya. What's there to do there? Like, this is not really our thing, which to me now just feels wild that we said no to that. But he was the one and he came to visit us, and he spoke about like horse riding in Kenya. And I was actually supposed to go to a place that he knew of in Kenya, and do horse riding there and like volunteer at their farm. But then that ended up falling through, and that's how I kind of was hooked on just the idea of like horses and like Africa, because he had spoken so highly of it, and like how you could do horse riding, you know, in Africa, and also see all these incredible animals. So that's how I ended up Googling just the like Africa horses volunteering. And then the place in South Africa was the first one that kind of came up that I felt like, oh, this looks cool. So that's how I ended up in South Africa. So it's super just random circumstances.
Really, really random circumstances. But it always sounds like you were like always interested in animals and that type of stuff. Was that always the way for you?
Yeah, I think so. I've like obviously the horse riding was always like a big thing, like with the animals and everything. But also I was a scout when I was younger, so I was always like out in nature a lot and just always enjoyed nature, and found an interest in animals and like how they live and what like, you know, behavior and all those type of things. Always had an interest in it, and then I think that just all came together in one with like the photography and ending up on the horse safari place in South Africa. Then it was just, it kind of, something just clicked, and I was like, okay, wow, this is something that really sparked something in me, if that makes sense.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't doing photography that much up until that stage, as you said?
I wasn't doing wildlife photography much. I was doing a bit of, I've always been like interested in photography and enjoyed photography. And like when I was younger, me and my friends would do like photo shoots, you know, with my dad's camera, and like just, you know, because my dad had a DSLR camera. So we would borrow that, and we would go out and do our photo shoots in different areas, which was a lot of fun. So I've always had like an interest in photography. And then I got my own camera when I was 15 from my parents, and that also just, you know, again, just really enjoyed. I don't know what it was. I just literally really enjoyed pressing the shutter. Like I just really enjoyed like holding a camera and just pressing and just seeing what came out and like what you could do. And just to really enjoy the camera. And then it was only the wildlife photography only became a thing when I came to South Africa. I'd never like photographed birds or anything before. It was just when I came to South Africa, my dad was like, well, you're going to go on safari, like you need a telephoto lens. And I was like, oh, do I need a telephoto lens? Like I had no clue. And he gave me his, I think it was a 70 to 200. It was like a push and pull focus, and completely manual focus, like everything. And yeah, he gave me that for the trip. And that's when I was like photographing these animals. And I think the thing that sparked it in me, and I think that is still why I do this, is like that was a way for me to try to convey like what it was like seeing these animals to everyone back home. And that's what still to this day is why I do what I do. Like I constantly try to just explained what it's like seeing these animals and what we can see out here and how amazing it is to be out on safari in these wild animal areas. And I think that's what started it all, because I myself had no clue before I came to South Africa that this was even a thing and like possible at all. So it all just came down to me trying to tell my friends and family back home, like, look what you're missing. Like, this is what's out here. And that's still to this day kind of why I do what I do.
It's interesting to hear that that's kind of like sparked your style, because I feel like your style is very much like that. Like, I see your images and I'm like, wow, like that's incredible, because it's hard to convey. I know myself being a photographer, it's hard to convey what's actually happening there through an image. Like, as much, because you always have a connection to your images, right? And I'm sure that you hold that very special to you because you were there and you actually took that image and you were around those animals. But then to convey that to someone online who has never seen any of these animals probably in real life, that is a real, hard sort of task. But you've managed to do that in a way that is really special. Was that something, because I think anyone can go out with the right sort of camera and take some type of photos of wildlife. But what was it for you that really spoke to you about, wow, I can actually portray what's going on in my head or what I'm actually envisioning here in real life and put that in an image? What was it about that actually spoke to you?
Well, thank you so much. That's awesome to hear that it's working and that I am conveying,
I'm sure it's working.
But it's really nice to hear, because, as you say, for someone who maybe have never seen these animals, like, I think for us who live here and who do this, and for other wildlife photographers who have, who also out there doing the same thing as I do, I think we sometimes get caught up in, like, is this photo good enough? And am I really like, oh, but this person's photo of a leopard is better and this and that. So it's really nice to hear that, because that is the goal at the end of the day. But I think it's an interesting question. I think for me, the editing is a very big part of it, of like conveying, the feeling of what it was like seeing it. Because I think, as you say, like, especially in today's day and age and with the camera equipment that we have available to us today, you can quite easily pick up a really good camera and you can get some decent photos of wildlife. Then I also do have to say, obviously, there's a lot there that comes down to the skill of, like, not with specifically wildlife photography. It's a lot about like animal behavior and getting the right timing and knowing the animals and positioning yourself in the right place, and also just finding the animals to start with is also a big one. But then obviously, like, all things like composition and the right settings and all of that obviously plays a big part, as we all know, with photography. But I think sometimes, you can get lucky getting a good photo, and then it's more about just, okay, I pressed the shutter in the right time and I got lucky, but is it actually conveying what you're trying to tell, and so on. And I think that's where I feel the editing is your chance to put your artistic touch on it and really convey the feeling of what it was like being there, and adding a lot more to the image than just what came straight out of the camera. And I think that's where I love editing, and I've always loved the editing part of the process, because I feel like that's where I'm really able to bring out what I'm trying to say with a photo. And then that plays a lot hand in hand with the, in-camera part of it, of getting the right settings and all of that. And I can often, like, while I'm taking the photo, kind of know how I'm going to edit it later, if that makes sense. And, like, those two things work hand in hand. And I know, okay, let me, like, go overexposed here because I want to make this, like, a high-key black and white photo in post-processing. Like, the situation is perfect for that. So then I know to do those preparations in camera and then just finish up the process in post-processing, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I think editing is a big part of where I feel like I add feeling to the photo and add, making it darker or lighter or whatever it might be.
What was the sort of moment for you where you realized that you were able to get yourself in the right positions and actually plan to take the right images? Because I feel like that comes with experience. So where did you sort of hit that along your journey? Because I feel like that's really eye-opening when you're able to go, oh no, I actually know what I'm doing here. I'm not just going out and taking good photos by chance.
I love that question because I think I know the exact moment when that actually happened, or like when, maybe not when I was like, okay, I can do this. It was more like where it clicked for me of like, oh wait, it matters what time of the day I go out. It matters where and what I do and everything, because so in the beginning, and I think that's for most beginners, especially for wildlife photography, you kind of just, I would take my camera with me pretty much anywhere I went because I was like, you never know what happens. And especially when you live in the bush like I did, it's, there could literally be a leopard on the road as you're driving to work. That didn't happen very often, but it could happen. But there would often be like a giraffe on the way to work, so it's crazy what can happen and you never really know. So I would always constantly have my camera in my car, and then because I was working in the bush, I was working in the lodge industry, not like wildlife photography related. I was just front of house, as it's called, so like guest relations and receptionist kind of thing. So I was based at the lodge, like at the hotel. I wasn't out in the wild much, but I was allowed to join on the safaris, so we call them game drives. Whenever there was space and I wasn't working in the afternoon, they allowed me to join just to kind of get out there and see, so I would often as I could try to join, and that would maybe be like once a week that I was able to join on the game drives. And then I would always bring my camera, of course, but then I was just sitting in the passenger seat, and I was just there as a staff member. The guests were obviously the ones who were prioritized all the time. So I was just snapping whatever I could as we were out, in the wild. So at that point, until that point, it was very much just like whatever opportunity I can get to take any sort of photo of wildlife, that's what I'm going to do. And I was also shooting on 100% auto. I didn't do much with my settings, even though I knew things like aperture and shutter speed. I don't think I knew how to apply it specifically for wildlife photography. So I was shooting on auto. And then the one afternoon, I remember so specifically, I went down to the lodge in the afternoon, even though I wasn't working. And I was like, I just want to sit here because there's a kingfisher that comes around often to the dam that the lodge was overlooking. And I was like, there's often it was a giant kingfisher that comes and sits on this one branch. And I was like, I really want to get a photo of a giant kingfisher because they're really pretty. And so I went down there in the afternoon with my camera, and I just sat and waited. And the kingfisher didn't come around, but there was monkeys that came around, and they started eating from this tree that's called a weeping boerbean. And it's a tree with very beautiful, bright red flowers. So I started taking photos of the monkeys, and kind of, again, just snapping away, not really knowing what I'm doing. Just trying to capture these monkeys. And the cool thing was that they were eating these flowers. So and the monkeys they're vervet monkeys, so they're kind of grayish in color. And then you had these super bright red flowers that they were stuffing their face with. So I got really cool photos of them, with the contrast of the gray and the bright red, and then kind of the greenery around it. And those photos are, until this day, some of my favorite photos, even though they were shot in JPEG and I can't really do anything with them now, which I am kicking myself for, but it's part of the journey. Those photos, I was like, when I got home and I started looking at them, I was like, whoa, they turned out amazing. And I was like, how did this happen? I was just snapping away, and I was like, what was different about this situation to all the other times when I'm just out there snapping away? And that's when I started realizing, okay, the light made a massive difference because the sun was setting and it was gorgeous, golden hour kind of soft light. The colors of, the color contrast is also what makes the photo really good. And then because of the low light, even though I was shooting on auto, my aperture went down to as low as possible. So that also helped with creating those blurry background. So all of those things obviously play into this photo. And that made me realize that if I'm putting myself in the right position at the right time with the right light, this is what I can create. And that made me think, like kind of rethink the way I did photography, rather than just going out there and seeing what happens, being like, okay, let me go out there during the right time of the day, and like, okay, these were maybe the settings I need to start thinking of, and like all of those kind of things. So that was a moment where it really clicked for me of like, okay, this is how involved I need to be. And this is what a massive difference it makes if I am more conscious about like the choices I make taking these photos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's amazing that you actually have understanding of when that actually happened. There is more to photography than just how to use your camera.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why for me, sometimes I get frustrated with the question of like, people ask about settings very often for certain images. And as much as settings do obviously make a difference, and I do think like, obviously we need to know how to set the right settings. Some photos are purely like, it's not about the settings. Like the settings are the exact same as if I would have shot a different time. But in the settings isn't what makes the photos. It's the situation that like happens, and the way the light is perfect, and the way the animal is walking perfectly, and like all of those kind of things coming together in one. And for me to recognize that this is a potential for a specific type of photo is also a massive difference, because I know that because I do workshops, and a big part of my job is teaching photography, I know that other people don't recognize specific opportunities for a specific type of photos, and that's part of my job to communicate like, okay, this is an opportunity for a rim light photo, for example, or like, look at the light, this and this, let's do these things because there's an opportunity for this type of photo. And I know that people, especially beginners, won't recognize those situations. And that's where I get frustrated with people being like, oh, what was your settings in this photo? And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like the settings were just a purely like making sure I get the correct exposure. Like the settings didn't make a difference here. It's the situation that made a difference. And you're not going to be able to take the same photo unless you have the same situation, no matter if you're using the same settings or not. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I think sometimes people focus too much on the settings and not like on the light, and as you say, being able to anticipate reactions out of, for you it's people and for me it's animals, of being able to anticipate that and get the perfect moment makes so much more of a difference than like the settings. I hope that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's 100% true, and I think as much as it's important to learn how to use a camera, it's equally as important to learn how to get in those positions, how to use like lighting and things like that, how to know what time of day to go out. And it kind of sounds like for you, like that was one of the biggest things early on, was you were really taking every opportunity you could to go out and like practice, like talking about working like in the lodge, having those opportunities to go out. Like not everyone would have said, yeah, I'll go out and take photos, but you did. You were like, no, I'm going to go out and use these opportunities, even if I don't know what it is I will want to do with, and I don't know my way around using a camera yet. I'm just going to go out and take them because I know that experience, that practicing that over time is what has gotten you to this point. Was that something that you were like always really eager to go at those opportunities that you had?
I don't know. I think it's funny because looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, it all just like kind of fell into place. And I was like, oh, of course I needed to go out there and practice. Of course I needed to do that. But at the time, wildlife photography wasn't on the cards at all. I didn't realize it could be a career at all. Like I had no clue. And it was only later on that I realized, oh, I could possibly make money from this, and this could possibly become a career and a full-time job. Like that was mind-blowing when I actually realized that was possible. But at the time, when very early on there, I think I was just enjoying the photography so much. I just loved like capturing these moments. I just loved being out in nature, and I just loved pressing the shutter of my camera and seeing what came out. And that was all it came down to. I just wanted to be out there, and just took every opportunity I could to just be out in nature and pressing the shutter. Like that was literally where it came down to. But I do think that And I tell people this as well when they ask, like, okay, how can I do what you do, or like what steps should I take and everything. And I say, like, the most important thing is practice. And if you're not, I was fortunate to be living in Kruger National Park, so obviously that's a very unique situation. But even if it's just going out to practice, like the birds that are in your garden, wherever you live in the world, that practice is going to make a massive difference to the rest of if you're wanting to do this as a career, to the rest of your career. You need to practice, and you need to practice the basics. You need to practice different light conditions, and you need to know your gear in and out and learn like the animal behavior. Because then when you do get an opportunity to photograph the like more rare and big animals, or like let's say you come on a safari to Africa or whatever, you will know exactly what you're doing with your camera, and you'll be able to capture the right moments when you have those opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think like practice is everything. So understanding what it is that actually makes a good image in that moment only comes through practice. Like, you can't learn that. You can't give that answer to someone as much as you're like, here's what's happening in my head. And I'm sure that you do it, as well when you're trying to teach other people how to do photography. You're like, this is what's going through my head, but this has only come about. I only have that intuition because of the years that I've spent practicing.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure it's similar like for wedding photography as well. Like, you're not going to pick up a camera and be like, I'm going to go and do a wedding now and I'm going to nail every shot. Like, that's not how it works. You need to pick up a camera and then practice on maybe friends and family and, other things, just to practice, how do I take portraits? How do I do this? And then like weddings for me, I've said it before, like, I've got such huge respect for you wedding photographers, because I think that is such a high pressure environment to be in, and like just such high stakes that I don't know if I could ever do that. Because for me, like, we don't need to pose our animals. We just take the opportunity as it comes and whatever. And it's just such a different kind of field. And for weddings, for me, I'm like, I don't know if I could deal with that pressure, and because that is people's like most precious memories that you're capturing. That's amazing. So I've got such huge respect for you guys, and I'm sure that it's similar there, where you need to know exactly what you're doing when you're in that high pressure environment and you are capturing these people's wedding day. And you like don't want to miss that first kiss. You don't want to miss that reaction of the groom and like, or the reaction of the guests and like all of those kind of things. It must be quite crazy, and you need to know exactly what you're doing and need to have that intuition of like, okay, I need to go here, I need to go there. And I think people sometimes undervalue that part of photography, or don't appreciate that part of photography as much as like the settings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I hear that all the time. I'm like, everyone's happy to tell you that your camera does take a good photo, but it's like, no, there's a lot more that goes into taking a good photo than just having a good camera. And I do, as you said before, like, yeah, like, I appreciate that, like, weddings for people are high stress, because you don't get those moments back. So if I was spending too much time like thinking about how I'm going to take this image, the moment has already gone, so you can't spend that time. But I'm always like impressed by the work you do, because to me it's so out of control. Like, I'm very fortunate that I work with people that I can speak to them and ask them exactly what to do. Like, in your world, like, there's like, you can't ask the animals what to do. You're not in control at all. You just have to be in the position, to be able to take good photos.
Yeah, in one way though, I think that's what I like. I think, so I had a conversation with one of my guests about this, who is a more like landscape photographer from the start, and then he is now wanting to learn more wildlife photography, and that's why he travels with me. And it's really interesting because we were recently on a trip together where we did a little bit more landscape photography, and I said to him, I'm like, this is not my field. We're in a place where like you can take really cool. We were at a place in Namibia called Koolmanskop, which is a like deserted mining town. So I'm sure you probably have seen photos of like, it's these houses that are just filled with sand, and it's really, really cool. And I was like, I've got no idea how to capture this. Like now I'm going to become the student and you the teacher. Like, you go ahead. And it was so cool because we were chatting about how, like, he said he's more of a person that likes to, like, set the situation up and, like, look, where is the light going to come and, like, what time is it the best time to be. And in this situation, we were moving from different houses and stuff to get different houses with different sand and everything. And he was like, okay, this time will be the best for this house, because after this time, then the light is going to be too high up and we're not going to get the shadows that we want. And then, like, okay, and then we're going to move over to this house because that's better later on, because then we're getting the shadows we want from this angle and whatever. And I was like, that is mind-blowing for me, because I will never plan ahead like that. I can never picture a photo and, like, plan ahead and be like, oh, this is what I want to capture, so let me put myself in that position. I've got ideas of photos that I want to capture of animals, and when I see that opportunity occurring, I'll put myself in the right position and I will know what to do. But I can never plan a photo like that. For me, the comfort is in the unknown, and is in the, like, I don't have control, so I don't have to say where people, I don't have to direct and create. I just have to capture what I can and just make the best out of every single moment. For me, that is what I'm comfortable in. So it's just funny because it's, like, different, because I'm sure with, like, weddings and portraits and stuff and, like, people, like what you do, it's a lot more like, okay, you sometimes have to tell people, like, okay, do this, stand there, do that. And, like, for me, I'm super uncomfortable doing that, because I rather do just capturing whatever comes along, which is what wildlife is, and just do the best out of every single situation. But with that being said, it is sometimes super frustrating when you've got an animal in the perfect light, in the perfect environment, and they just, like, continue eating grass, like, and you're just like, just look up, just please look up for me, like, just lift your head, and they just don't. And then you're like, okay, it's one of those things.
You really landed on something that you enjoyed early on. You haven't really done much else outside of that. You've just really stuck to it. What was the real stage for you where you were like, this actually could be something that I turn into a career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it was social media was a big part of me realizing that, like, this is possible. As I said very early on, it was just like I just loved doing it, and I just wanted to do it as much as possible. And that's when I felt like being out in nature and capturing wildlife was when I felt the most, I don't know, at peace and while also being excited, because it's very exciting being out there and, like, having a lion walk past your car. Like, it's insane. But I think that social media was a major part of me being like, oh, wait, there's people out there who are doing this for a living. And, oh, these are the ways that they're doing it for a living. Like, these are the ways they're making money. And, like, kind of starting to realize that was an option. But then that also worked very much hand in hand. And I think that's where the wildlife photography specifically, because I think I did, like, think about, should I do photography in other ways? Like, would I do weddings? Would I do portraits? Would I do, like, product photography, or, like, do more of the type of influencer type of thing, which I guess I am in one way, but hate the word influencer. But yeah, so I was, like, thinking about different ways that I could incorporate photography, and seeing all these different people making photography as a job. But then I think the big thing that made it, like, just solidify for wildlife was obviously that's already what I was doing and what I loved doing. But also the fact that my fiance, he was a guide for more than a decade, and that's when we met, and that's how I ended up in the lodge industry working with him. And when we started, like, thinking about getting out of the industry, and when my ideas of the wildlife photography full time kind of started to grow, we spoke a lot about it, and together we kind of created this idea of starting our own travel company and our own safari company, and that works very much hand in hand with the wildlife photography. So that is a massive part of my job as well, is our company together. Even though I also have my own photography company, the safari company is ours together. And the idea was basically, like, it started from him having such extensive experience in the Kruger region, having worked at all these different reserves and lodges in the Kruger area, and then like getting a lot of questions from both from my social media, but also from like friends and family back home, from my side, but also like old guests that had traveled with us, or with him specifically in the lodge industry, who wanted to come back to Africa, and they were like, where should I go and what should I do and how do I plan my safari? So because planning a safari is a very different type of holiday than like going to a European city and like booking some restaurants. Like it's very, very different. So that's where kind of the idea of the company grew, and that works very well together with the photography, because we get a lot of photographers who book with us and wanting to do wildlife photography, and we know the places we should book them to, or they will come with me and I'll teach them photography as we go along. So like these workshops that we do, for example, is a group of people that come and they want to learn more about wildlife photography. Either they already quite experienced themselves, or they like complete beginners, and then I teach them as we go along and as we're out in the wild looking for animals. So that's, I think, maybe what solidified it for wildlife photography specifically, is that it worked very well with our lives together, and being able to kind of, I don't know, the goals kind of aligned that way, and we were able to work together that way.
It's amazing that you've been able to do something, in that area that also, as you said, goes along with what it is that you guys enjoy and what it is that you have been able to do over the last few years. You're really handing on your own experience to other people and being like, hey, I'm able to enjoy this, so why not just ask other people to come along and enjoy it as well? How did you start to make an income through photography?
Yeah, it's a question I get so much. People often obviously wondering how do you get started? And for me, the first time I earned money from photography was through my print shop. I did a course, like a print shop challenge kind of thing, which I would 100% recommend, but the guy who did it doesn't do it anymore. So unfortunately, the course is not available. But that was what kickstarted it, because this is when the idea of this is possible to make happen kind of started. And I was growing on Instagram, and I was, investing a lot of time in my social media and my photography in general. And I had gotten questions from friends and family for prints, and I think my very first customer was one of my dad's friends who wanted photos. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And that was really cool, because it just gave me the confidence of there is people out there who want my photos on their walls, because that's a massive, massive thing. That's such a great compliment that people like my photos enough to want to have them in their home. So that gave me the confidence. And then I did this print shop challenge course kind of thing of how to actually set it all up from a website and everything. And he also went through, and I think that was massive, he went through how to market it and the steps to kind of take of where do you start talking about it, and how much do you push it, and how should you run an initial launch sale. And then also spoke a lot about the mindset of in the beginning, a lot of people get excited and then they put a lot of effort into it, and then they can maybe sell a few prints, and then they hit a plateau where they don't sell anything and they get discouraged, and then they just kind of let go of the project. And he was the ones who succeed are the ones who continue. So that really stuck with me, and I launched the print shop, and I did make a few sales that kind of brought me back my investment of what it cost to open the website and everything. So that was massive, and I was this is amazing. Okay, cool, I've made back my investment. Now it's just about if I hit that plateau that he spoke about, I just need to keep going. And what he said was you need to, you hit a plateau, you keep going for a bit, and then maybe you have a sale later on, and you have a new collection that comes out or whatever. You need to keep the interest spiking. So I had a sale for Black Friday a couple of months after I opened the shop, and I had a sale for Black Friday, and all of a sudden I got a notification on my phone that I had sold 15 prints to one person. And that was massive for me. And I was the amount of money was double my salary at the time in just one print sale like that. And also 15 prints is such a big order. I think she was buying it for an art gallery, something with a theater art gallery kind of thing. So it was a big order, and I was this can happen. Like this, then that was such a turning point for me. I was like, if I all of a sudden, because I've built this up, I've put everything out there, this can happen, where you never know who's watching on social media. You never know who might be interested in buying something from you or giving you an opportunity. And that was such a big mindset shift for me, where I was like, I can do this. So that was the first time it was really like, wow, I can do this. But with that being said, though, with the prints, I do have to say, because I get a lot of questions about it, today, print sales is a very small part of my income. And I would say in general, print sales is really difficult to make a full-time income from. It's a good place to start to just earn a little bit of money, but it is one of those things that is quite difficult to sell, because they need to be quite expensive to be able to make a profit. And most people won't just buy that on a whim, because they need somewhere in their home where they want this print, and it is a big investment, and it's a big thing to sell. So I will say to people, it's a great place to start, but don't bank on that being your full-time income, because it's very difficult to make that into your full-time income.
Was that an intentional strategy for you being on Instagram early on, like trying to sort of push your work out to more people?
The Instagram just was started because my friend pushed me to start it. She was like, very early on in my photography journey, she was like, you should post your photos on Instagram. And I was like, no, that's so cringe. Like, everyone has a wildlife photography Instagram after they've been in Africa. And I was like, no, I'm not good enough. No, this is so cringe. Like, I felt so embarrassed about it. But she pushed me, and me and my fiance was literally talking about this yesterday, because it's actually just so crazy to think about it today, because she was like, well, you never know what can happen, and you never know where it can take you. And that's literally what happened. It is my full-time job now. So to her, I'm eternally grateful, because she really pushed me, and she was like, you're starting this Instagram right now. I don't care about your excuses. You're doing this. So I did. And in the beginning, I was so embarrassed about it. And I was like, no, this is so cringe. And nobody is going to want to follow me, and nobody's going to care about my photography. So I was being super ironic with my captions. I would post a photo of a zebra and be like, oh, spot the elephant. And just be, super ironic about it, because I was like, and I think my caption, my bio said been to Africa once and started a wildlife photography Instagram, because I just thought it was so cringe. But she pushed me, and then I think the massive thing with Instagram was not really about getting my work out there. It became more about seeing other people's work, and because I started a wildlife Instagram dedicated to wildlife alone, and then I have my private Instagram that is for friends and family. That was okay, that's where I keep up with friends and family, whatever. The wildlife Instagram was, I only started following wildlife photographers, and then eventually other photographers as well. But that became massive for me, because all of a sudden I was exposed to other people's work, and also eventually for me to understand that I could make that into a full-time job, and that was accessible, was also massive, through Instagram. So for me, it wasn't really about getting my own work out there. It was more about actually getting inspired by other people. But then eventually, obviously, as I started taking it more seriously, I did obviously put a lot of effort into growing my Instagram, and that has later become a big part of it. And now today, I'm realizing, obviously, the Instagram is kind of the core of my business, is why I'm able to do what I do. But what it's become now is also realizing that, you never know who's watching. Just as this print sale came through randomly, anything, people buying anything else from my shop. Today, I've got my ebook and my prints and my presets and my wildlife photography editing course that is on, and those are all digital products, which has been massive, and all educational products, because that's kind of where I lean into with my job, is I do more educational stuff. That's kind of how I make it into a business. But I think the massive thing is, you never know who ends up buying something from your shop and supporting you that way. But also, you never know what companies are watching. I know you've recently started working a lot with Nikon Australia, which is awesome, and huge congratulations to that, because that's huge. And I do a bit of work, quite a lot of work with Sony here in South Africa, and that like literally came out of nowhere. It was an email one day that was like, hey, I like what you do. Let's do a collaboration. Do you want to work with Sony? And I was like, well, yes, like that's huge. And other opportunities like that has also come out. Like one thing now, I got an email from the UN biodiversity project, and I'm going to be doing a like takeover on their Instagram in a few weeks. And that's also huge. And I'm like, you never know who is watching and who might give you an opportunity. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in like the numbers and the likes and the comments and whatever. But I think if you just do your thing on social media, it has such a power to get into the right people's hands, even if it's not, even if you don't go viral every week. Like you can still get, it's not about how many people that see your work, it's who sees your work. And I think that is massive about social media.
I've always said that for me, it's about building the connections with other people. And I try to build that connection by spending a lot of time on there, uploading a lot of content that other people can sort of imagine themselves in that way, that I'm not trying to go viral with everything I upload, because I think if I did, it would sort of water down my content in the way that, like, I know what I could do if I wanted to go viral, but I don't want to go viral because I don't want that many people. I only want people who are interested in the work that I do. And I know that it isn't for everyone. Your art is so subjective that it doesn't really matter if you don't have anyone on there. It doesn't mean that it's not good work. It doesn't mean if you don't have a big Instagram, it doesn't mean your art is not great. It's just that people haven't had eyes on it yet. And it's wild that once people do, you'll start to get your types of people actually seeing your work. I think a lot of people get discouraged early on because one person had something bad to say about a piece of their art. And having one person out of a small group is not everyone. And don't let that person speak for everyone, because as you grow, there are always going to be those people who don't like your work. And I've just grown, and I'm sure exactly the same for you, like you've grown to just realize that. But equally and opposite, there are so many people who really enjoy your work. And by being able to get more eyes on your work, you're only going to increase that amount of people.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a massive lesson for people to learn, because it, as you say, like, you know, you're not focusing on going viral every week. Like, you know what you could do to go viral, but you don't want that because that's actually not going to benefit you. And I feel like on social media right now, so many people are too focused on going viral, and it is watering down their work, like you said. And it's creating this environment of like, your work is only as good as the amount of likes or views that you get, which is not true. And it's, you know, on social media, there's a certain type of content that goes viral. And I think if we only focus on going viral and only focus on that type of content, we just lose a whole other aspect of it. And exactly like you said, the connection and the community is my absolute favorite thing about social media. Like, just look at us, you know, we would have never connected if it wasn't for social media. And like, you're in Australia, you're like a completely opposite side of the world doing wedding photography, and I'm a wildlife photographer in South Africa. Like, and it's really been awesome to connect with you. And now we're here doing a podcast, which is great. And I have got the same, like, similar relationships with a lot of other people on social media as well, where it starts off by just following each other because you're like, oh, this person is doing some cool work. Or like, you know, I saw your reels and I was like, oh, these are awesome reels. And like, this is such great tips. And like, this is great. Let me follow this person because like, this is awesome. I want to see more of what they do. And then you end up like commenting, and then you end up they commenting back on your stuff. And then all of a sudden you're talking on messages about this or that. And all of a sudden you've created a friendship with someone you've never met before through just like photography and that connection. And I think that is the absolute most important thing about social media. And for me as well, just showing like this past trip that I was on is such a great example of that. I literally had people from all over the world, from 9 different countries, from 6 different continents. We only had 2 people that was two people that was from the same country, and they were a couple. So that's, you know, everyone else was from different countries. So that just shows how, like, this power of social media. They have all found me on social media and decided to book a trip with me, and then we all became this big family and all good friends through this adventure that we were on together. And that's so powerful, and that doesn't have anything to do with going viral. It has to do with people finding me on social media and feeling like they get a connection with me, and they're like, I want to travel with this person because it seems like we would get along and they seem like a good person to travel with. And then you end up traveling together, and then other people who have felt the same come on the same trip, and then you automatically kind of the same type of people with the same type of mindset, so you really connect with each other. And that is just incredible. And I think that's what people completely lose out on when they just focus on the whole going viral thing, and just focus on the numbers. And I'm like, it's not about how many people are watching, it's about who's watching and how much of a connection you can have with those people.
I'm really inspired by what you've been able to do there in being able to bring the community from online to offline and be able to do that work in person. Like, and to have a small group of people, as you said, that have come from all over the world just to be there with you. That must really feel like you've really, achieved something there when you're able to get people to fly across the world to come and spend, a week with you on safari. How has that journey been in operating that and sort of running that community and running that as a business?
Yeah, it's been crazy, and it started off slow. Like it was difficult in the beginning to get like people to sell the trips, and to and it can still be depending on like the time of the year and stuff. Some trips will sell better than others, so sometimes it's stressful about like getting enough people for a trip to actually be able to run it and all that. But with the Tanzania trips, I've worked with an incredible company called V2 Africa, and they are a Tanzanian tour operator. So they basically, the same as like the business that me and my fiance run, we run it in South Africa. They do the same thing, but in Tanzania. And because we're not experts in Tanzania, we're not going to try to do that ourselves, rather use an expert and partner with someone in that field. And they've been amazing in being able to handle like these trips and being the like administrative part of these trips. And I'm really grateful for them, and especially the owner, Abduli, who has been my contact person from the start, to give me the chance, because he was the one who first contacted me saying like, hey, do you want to run trips in Tanzania with us, and like this is how we can work it. So that's how I actually started doing these trips. And then because he gave me that opportunity and really helped me with all of that and have been amazing through that journey, I was like, I could probably do this in South Africa as well. And then we started the South African ones, and now I'm growing into doing more. So I'm actually doing one in Botswana next year with a company in Botswana that I freelanced for a few weeks ago, incredible company called Pangolin, who are like solely focused on photography. They amazing the stuff that they do from a wildlife photography point of view. And I was freelancing for them for a month, and I'm going to be doing more work with them next year, which is awesome. And I'm going to be doing a workshop through them in Botswana in August next year. So if anyone is interested in that, please let me know, because it's going to be incredible. So now I'm like branching out and doing different things, and wanting to do, eventually I want to do like tigers in India, or like the Pantanal and Svalbard. Like I want to do all these different ones, and it's quickly become a big part of my business to run these trips. One, because it gives me an opportunity to go out in the field and like put me in the field of being able to continue doing my wildlife photography. But two, because I absolutely love like teaching. I've always been very passionate about teaching, and I thought I was going to become a teacher when I was younger, and before I ended up on this whole journey. And now I'm able to do teaching through the photography. And I just love doing that. And I'm sure you also similar. I know you also do some workshops every now and then, and obviously you teach a lot on social media as well. And being able to combine these two passions of like teaching and photography has been amazing for me. And then also on top of that, just like as much as I love the animals and the amazing sightings that we see and doing the photography, I am a people's person, and I do this for the people. And like the guests that I have with me are just, I've been so lucky to have the most incredible guests with me on pretty much every single trip I've done. And I think it's because they connect with me through social media. So we already have a connection. We already kind of similar people. So you just continue that connection on when you travel. And that's just been an incredibly beautiful part of my job, to be able to connect with people that way and travel with amazing people. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Was that scary when you first started that, to be able to put yourself up there and work with people and have that trip planned, but not knowing if anyone would sort of turn up? And also, I guess, how you felt educating people in person. How was that whole experience, and how was navigating that space?
It was super scary. The very first trip I did, I had the most incredible guests who to this day are still traveling with me and have become, good friends. So I was lucky to have really amazing guests that were just easy to work with. But it was super scary. As you say, first of all, putting the trip out there felt very vulnerable. I was and I think that's completely just a mindset thing, and nobody actually cares. So it was just me caring. But I was what if I put this trip out there and then people see that it doesn't sell and they see that I end up not going? That's so scary. But I think nobody actually was watching. Nobody cares except for me. But that was scary, and felt very vulnerable. But at the same time, I think the good thing was that I was working with such a great company as We To Africa in Tanzania, and the way it works was basically okay, if people book, then people book, and then the trip runs. But if people don't book and we don't get enough people, then I haven't invested anything. You don't have to pay the lodges until you actually have guests who are booking and paying their deposit. And that's the good thing. it wasn't I needed to invest a lot of money in booking this trip, and then I needed to sell this to actually make back that investment. So I was grateful for that. But it was super scary. And then once it actually sold and it was going ahead, I was obviously super excited at first, and then I was scared because I'm oh wow, now I need to how do I actually teach people? What do I do in the field? How do I do it the best way? And that's still to this day, there's no course of this is how you do teaching wildlife photography. I watch a lot of other people and see what they do, and then obviously with experience and now having done it a lot, I know what pain points I should focus on. I know what people will struggle with, and I know what to, and also depending on which level they're at, I know what settings to focus on telling people and what they usually get right themselves. And all of those kind of things come with experience. But in the beginning, I was okay, I basically just have to say what settings I use. And sometimes I don't even know what settings are right. I don't even know if I'm using the right settings because things happen so quick and you just, you're still winging it a lot of the time. So how do I tell people what settings I use and what composition to do? And how do I best explain this as well and communicate it to them, for them to understand what I am picturing in my mind of what photo we can capture in this situation. So it's been a learning curve for sure, and I think it's always going to be a learning curve of I'm learning new things every day of okay, people struggle with this, and here I need to be more clear about this and that. I think it's constantly one of those things. But yeah, it was super scary in the beginning, but then I think the people part of handling people, I've always worked in jobs where I've done that before, so I think that came quite easy. I've worked at schools and handled kids, sure, but sometimes people on holiday can be like kids, so it can be very much the same. But then also in the lodge industry, obviously being guest relations and doing and then also I worked in the restaurant industry, being a waitress for a while. So I've done that handling people kind of part, even though I'm not in the lodge industry now, I'm still in the service industry in the sense that I'm a tour host and photo host, as we can call it. So I think that very much helped, and it's the handling people. It was one of those things that I already had in my baggage. So that was quite good to have that to lean on, at least.
Is there anything that you would say to people who are scared to take that jump into educating people in person?
I think what I would say is that people know a lot less than you think. I think we will compare ourselves to the other photographers on Instagram, and like and then it's like, yes, you probably don't have a lot to teach and so on, but the people who you should actually focus on are not the other photographers that you follow and that you see. It's the people who follow you, which might be other photographers, but most of the time it might be people who are complete beginners, or who just enjoy, from my point of view, just enjoy photography and just enjoy wildlife. And like, what I've learned is that sometimes the most simple things are literally what people need to learn, and the things that feel so simple to me, where I sometimes even forget to mention them, will be the most detrimental thing for people to learn from. Like as an example, sometimes I get beginners who literally do not know how to turn their camera on. Like that, that's how beginner some people are, where they've never held a camera in their hand in their life. And I think things that for me then become so natural, of like, how do you zoom with a zoom lens? Like, how do you zoom? Okay, you twist it like this. For me, that is such an obvious thing that I'll forget to even mention it, and they'll be like, "Oh, how do you zoom?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow, sorry." Like, for me, I thought that's obvious, and that's what I mean. Like, I'm constantly learning about certain things that may become so natural for me that I forget to mention it to my guests. And learning how to kind of gauge where people are at, like in their photography journey, and what they need help with. Because with a person like that, there's no point of me being like, "Oh, you need to use." I will help them with shutter speed and stuff, but like there's no point of me being like, "Okay, use this super complicated focus system and do your customized buttons like this and that." There's no point of me teaching someone that when they don't know how to zoom with their telephoto camera. You just need to start at their level and get out there. So what I'm trying to say is that I think there's always going to be people who know more than you, and there's always going to be people who know less than you. And if you want to teach, and if you feel like you have any type of knowledge in photography, as in like you know how to turn a camera on, you can teach someone something. And you just have to focus on those people who know less than you, because they are out there. They're most likely following you already. And just have to focus on those people. And the people who know more than you, they know already that they know more than you. So they're probably not going to reach out to you anyway, or going to try and engage with that anyway, or book a trip with you anyway, because they know what level they're at. And if they feel like they know more than you already, then they're not going to book with you, because they will book with another photographer who's at a higher level than themselves. But even sometimes when I get photographers who are super experienced, I can feel intimidated, and I'm like, "Oh, whoa, like, what am I going to teach this person? Like, their photos are great. Like, they're doing amazingly. Like, what do I teach them?" But there's always something that they are interested in asking you about. And there's always something where, because I'm out in the field all the time, I will know more about like animal behavior, and I'll know more about different opportunities that come about and all that. There's always something I can teach them. But then at the same time, you also have to be humble with like, they will teach me stuff. Like that time with the guy that I said who does landscape photography, I was like, "Brood, like I'm gonna be in your hands now. Like this, you the teacher turned student. Like this is out of my field. Like, what aperture are you using here? Like, what exposure compensation do you think we should use in this situation?" and so on. I asked him all those things, and it's also about being humble to know that sometimes you also need to learn from your students, because you can't know everything. And I think if you get good people traveling with you, they're going to respect you more for that than anything else.
Education is that really interesting space where, as you said, there's always someone below you. There's always someone you can help. And it's as surprising as it is, it's always true. Like you will always know more than a select group of people, because as much as you may have just learned how to turn on your camera, there's a group who, as you said, don't know how to turn on a camera. So you can help them, and even if a person may know more about their camera than you do, or more about the art form, they may have not worked in your environment before. They may have not been to that specific location. They may have not done the work that you do every single day. So understanding that you can help everyone, and being open to learn from other people. I'm sure that that's a really nice experience that you're able to have there in person, interacting with other people, doing the work that it is that you do on a daily basis anyway. You go out and take those photos, but now you're just bringing a whole group of people along on that journey with you to be able to experience that. I'm sure that adds a lot to what it is that you do and your like memory of those moments and how you're able to actually capture images, because you're around those people who are also really enjoying it as well, and also who are there to learn. So you're able to put yourself in that mindset as well.
No, it's amazing. And I think what I also want to dive into what you said there, like you're always going to know more about like a specific area or environment or something. And I think for people who are wanting to start like teaching and doing that step of like starting teaching face to face and like in person, if you you don't have to be based in Kruger like I am. Like I'm very fortunate to be based where I am, and that's under very random circumstances like we covered. But you can get started in your local area. Like I know so many photographers in Europe, for example, who live in like big cities in Europe, but they know the natural areas where you can find wildlife, and they do things like an afternoon workshop session where like you start quite small, where you don't have to price it too high, so there's not as much pressure of like, but I'm paying you this much for teach me. So like, but two, you also don't have to travel too far, like it's in your local area. It doesn't have to be super high stakes because it's not going out looking for a leopard that people have traveled across the world to see. It's going out in your local area trying to find a nice bird and beautiful light. Like it can be a lot more calm environment that way, and that's a great place to start, like just starting small of like, okay, this afternoon, put it on your like local Facebook group. This afternoon, I'm a wildlife photographer. You want to come learn with me? Let's go out there and look for beautiful wildlife or just beautiful nature to photograph, and teach people along the way. Just for 4 hours or something at golden hour time. Like starting small like that is great, and then you can build up to make bigger trips, and you can do things like, okay, because you're probably going to get people who then come out with you more and more often, and then they're like, I love learning from you, I love like being in nature with you, so like, are you doing other trips? And then it's like, okay, cool, let's do a trip to this place, and you build like a workshop, and then maybe you end up actually traveling to Africa and doing like a workshop in Africa. It's just about building from where you are and what opportunities do you have around you, where can you start, and then kind of build from there, and you can get to bigger trips, and then you'll be more confident in that as well.
I know you spoke about before you wanted to go and do some other trips outside of Africa. What are the big ones for you that you're really thinking of into the future?
There's a few. I've got a list. This is like a 10-year, 15, 20-year plan. Like I'm hoping to be able to do this for a long period of time. And I know like Svalbard is definitely very high up on the list. Or polar bears in general. It doesn't have to be in Svalbard. I might do like Alaska or something. Just polar bears would be amazing. And then in America, Yellowstone is also really high up on the list. I follow so many wildlife photographers from Yellowstone, and that is like, I'm getting super excited about going there. Which I'll see whenever that happens, but that's definitely very high up. And then tigers in India is a huge one, and a little secret is that I might be doing tigers in 2026. It's still very much up on the cards, but it's in the works and it might happen. So yeah, just a little plug there for anyone who might be interested. So that's super, super exciting. That will be my first trip out of Africa, hosting a trip out of Africa. So yeah, we'll see. But it's very much up in the cards still, so nothing is decided, but it might be in 2026. But then otherwise, there's also like so many areas in Africa that I want to visit still, and do workshops in. I want to try to offer workshops in different types of environments, because like Kruger is one type of environment, and then like Serengeti is quite different. Kruger is a lot more like woodland savanna, so there's a lot of like thickets and a lot of more tighter standing trees, if that makes sense. Well, like Serengeti is just open savanna, that classic like open nothingness, and then you have like a few trees here and there. So it's very, very different ecosystems. And then you've got like Botswana, which I'm doing next year. It's amazing because we're doing like the rivers of Chobe, which is an incredible photographic opportunity, and then doing like the Okavango Delta, and then into the Kalahari Desert. So there's like 3 different ecosystems in one country that you just get completely different types of animals and chances of different types of photos and so on. And then you get like Namibia, which is so like mostly just desert, where you get different types of animals that you don't get anywhere else really, than in the desert ecosystems. So like I want to try to offer different workshops like that, where you go to different areas that have very different things to offer. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment.
That's amazing to really hear you speak about that and like all the dreams that you have. If, you know, all the opportunities open up and I could go anywhere, where would I go? I don't know, because I'd never really imagined that I would have that opportunity. So it's really nice, you know, to hear you speak about it in that way.
Yeah, but it's also like you said, and I'm sure it's similar for you as well, like because you've also had this like crazy journey of getting to where you are today. And, you know, it's crazy when you think about it, of like, as you say, 10 years ago, I wouldn't even have dreamt of being where I am now. But also, like just 2-3 years ago, I was dreaming about what I'm doing today. So I'm like, okay, how exciting is that 3 years ago, this was my dream, and this is how much I've achieved, and this is the crazy things that have happened in my life at the moment. Imagine the crazy things that will happen in the next 3 years. Like the opportunities that come up that you never knew happened. Like we said, like random emails that come through with really cool collaboration opportunities, or trips, or whatever it might be, of like, okay, can you do this? Like, you never know who's watching. You never know what opportunities might come about if you just put yourself in the right position and work hard to be ready for those opportunities when they come. And also, like, I don't know, continue in doing what you, I think, are passionate about and what you're good at, because that shines through on like social media, for example. And that will then, I'm very much of a firm believer of like, that will then bring good things because you are working hard and your passion shines through. So then good things will come with that and good opportunities will come about. So I'm sure it's similar for you as well. You've also had a crazy journey of getting to where you are today, of like, okay, imagine where you will be in 3 years, you know?
Exactly. I have no idea where I'll be in 3 years, and I don't even try to plan it, to be honest, because I'm just like trying to go with the opportunities that present themselves. I'm trying to allow myself the space, you know, to be open to those opportunities when you do get an email in the inbox that asks you to actually go and do something. Or if I do want to go and plan something, you know, I'm planning to go on and do some overseas trips next year, and going to do some go and do some workshops internationally, hopefully. So, you know, like crazy ideas that I wouldn't have even had. But just like you don't get there unless, you know, you start and you actually put yourself out there and actually turn up and continue to do what it is you love, and continue to, you know, help other people and just be able to put that out there in the world. I think that is really important. You know, if you don't put it out there in the world to other people, how will anyone else know that that's what it is you would like to do? So how can they connect on something that you haven't ever told anyone else?
Amazing. So where are you, what international trips are you working on?
To go to the States next year. So that's a little bit of a heads up for everyone. I haven't really actually spoken about it a lot, but plan to go to the States in March, April next year. So hoping to do a workshop over there, early stages of planning it at the moment. But yeah, like really like wild to even have that idea, because I know that this time last year I wouldn't have even like thought that was even an option. But I continue to get like messages from people asking for one in the States, like asking me to come and do something over there, because as I said, here in Australia, we're just so far away from everyone else, and hearing that there is a community of people who do actually want that is really, you know, inspiring, because it really proves to me that you are able to make something work. You know, you just have to keep turning up at it and keep being able to put yourself out there and keep, you know, educating people and keep being able to help people, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is that I love, because I love photography, and being able to give that to someone else. You know, I never planned that when I started, but it's amazing to see where that's been able to sort of take me.
That's amazing, man. Wow. It's just wild where like the social media and photography can just take you literally across the world on the craziest adventures. It's an amazing life, and it's just crazy to think it's possible.
It is crazy. All I ever tell people, the only indicator for success is that if you don't quit, and that's the only thing that I can say to anyone, who's been working at something over a long period of time.
100%. I completely agree. It's just about there's no pathway that you can do this step and then that step and then this step. It's just about just get started and then just see where it takes you and what you can do and just keep working hard on it even when it's tough. And it will eventually pay off. That's kind of the most simple answer you can give people.
I think I could ask you 100 more questions, Karolina, but we've been talking for quite a long time, but I think that's actually a good place to end the conversation here today. I wanted to ask you about so much more, like your editing course. I wanted to ask you about the podcast. I wanted to talk to you about you and Craig as well. I thought that would be, I really wanted to ask everything, but I've got to hold on. I'd love to, ask you again where you are at like end of the year, early next year. We could have a completely new conversation about all the things that you're working on, because as you said, things can change so quickly, and very, excited to hear about all things that you have in the plans.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will just have to do a part 2.
Is there anything else that you wanted to let people know before we end up today? Where can people sort of hear more about your work, what it is that you do, the work that you do with the work you do with Craig as well, with safaris and that? Where can people hear about all that type of stuff?
You can find me on my Instagram is where I'm most active, and that's Karolina Norée Wild. And then from my Instagram, you'll probably be able to find pretty much everything else. But we've got my website is karolinanoree.com, and that's where I've got like all my prints and all that, but also my educational digital resources, such as my ebook, which is a wildlife photography for beginners ebook, and then I've got my editing course, which is an editing course focused on wildlife photography specifically, but that also goes through especially the first half of it goes through all the settings and everything in Lightroom specifically, and how I utilize them and tips and tricks along the way. So that's my educational stuff on my website that you're welcome to check out if anything of that interests you. And then on my website, you could also find my 2025 dates for my workshops to Tanzania and to South Africa. And soon, hopefully, the Botswana one will be up as well. I'm just waiting for the final details there. So I have a email list of people who are interested. So if anyone is interested in Botswana specifically, please just reach out and give me your email, and then I'll email you once all the details are ready. And then otherwise, if it's not workshops, to travel with me in we do privately booked trips as well. And that would be through mine and Craig's company, Wildest Kruger Safaris, which you can also find through my Instagram. You can welcome to just reach out to us with kind of what trip you're looking for and what safari you're looking for and so on. And then if it's with us or without us, that's completely up to you. If you want us to privately guide you, where we basically come with through the whole trip and help you with either photography or whatever it might be through the whole trip, or if you just need help to book a safari, that's also what we do, is just help planning safaris and so on, even if we don't not with the trips ourselves. I think that's it. Oh, and then our podcast. We also have a podcast, me and Craig, where you can get to know us a little bit better. That's called Wildest Kruger Stories, and that's basically a lot of wild stories from the bush. Is pretty much how we, how we name it. I think that's it. It's a lot of different things, but start on my Instagram and then you'll find everything else.
Yeah, it's all the stuff there. It's always hard to remember all the different things that you have, but I think that's a great opportunity for everyone who is interested, in your work, to be able to go and actually book a trip with you. I think that would be just an amazing experience. And I spoke to you the other day about I would love to come and do one eventually. That we will, I will organize to get there, and I will do one, because I think that would be just the most incredible experience, especially with you being able to help me, because I would have no idea what I'd be so far out of my depth,
That would be amazing. Yeah, for sure. We definitely must make that happen. And as we said as well, even if we try to, obviously you're welcome to come with it just by yourself as well, because that would be awesome. But also, even if you want to try to create a workshop in South Africa from landscape, or even a wedding photography workshop incorporated with wildlife or something, it'd be so cool to host that together as well. So, it's what's cool about what we do with our company is that we pretty much have possibilities to create anything, and we can get other creators on board to host things with us in South Africa, which is really, really cool to have those opportunities. So pretty much anything is possible. It's just about planning it and making it happen. So hopefully we can make that happen one day.
We definitely will. Have a great rest of the day, Karolina, and we will talk again soon, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. You too. Have a great evening. And yeah, we'll definitely chat soon.
Well, that is the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation half as much as I enjoyed having it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you did leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below to let us know that you did enjoy this episode. Also, feel free to share this episode on Instagram and tag me at Mike Jeffrey Photography so I can reshare them on my stories. And also message me and let me know who you would love to hear on an upcoming episode of this podcast. I've always tried my best to be able to have conversations with people who are in the creative space and people that I think would be a good fit on this podcast. And I would love your input as well. Very privileged position at the moment where, I'm able to reach out to people and have them on my podcast and have really interesting conversations with a whole range of people in the creative space and talk about their creative journey. So if there's anyone you would love to hear from, please let me know and I will do my best to try to get them on the podcast. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the first creatives of the land on which I am recording today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia. As we tell stories of today, I just want to reflect on how First Nations people here and across the globe have guided and informed our understanding of the creative journey. But until next week, friends, have a lovely week and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye. Editing and post-production on this episode was done by Mossy Media, and music was created by JWPATON.